A quiet, 10-year-old girl walked into Maple Grove Elementary, her German shepherd waiting dutifully at the property line as school policy demanded. She was here to finish 4th grade and stay unnoticed after moving from a city that held too many painful memories. But before Olivia Wilson could even make it through the first week, the principal's daughter decided she was the perfect target. The laughter started first, then the whispers, then the public humiliation when they discovered her drawings of the mother she had lost. 3 weeks later, as autumn leaves began to fall across the small town, Shadow stood before the school board, a canine defendant facing exile from the only person who mattered in his world. But what nobody in Maple Grove realized about the German shepherd waiting so patiently was that he wasn't just any dog. Shadow had pulled 12 children from a collapsed school building during his service career, and what he would do next would remind them all exactly what that training meant. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments, along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. Maple Grove wasn't just any small town in rural America. Founded by veterans returning from World War II, it had a proud tradition of canine training that dated back decades. The town's Central Park even featured a bronze statue of a German shepherd standing alert beside a uniformed handler, a memorial to the service dogs who had saved countless lives overseas. It was this history that had drawn David Wilson to purchase the modest 2-story home on Elm Street, hoping the community would understand his daughter's special bond with Shadow. Olivia Wilson had once been a bright, talkative child with infectious laughter. That was before the elementary school collapse in their previous town, before she'd watched her mother, a volunteer art teacher, disappear under concrete and steel while pushing students to safety. The trauma had stolen her voice for months. Even now, at 10 years old, she spoke rarely and softly, her emotions flowing instead through the colored pencils that were never far from her small hands. Shadow moved with the quiet confidence of a dog who had seen the worst of humanity and chosen to believe in the best anyway. His dark fur was interrupted by a streak of gray on his chest earned during the rescue operation that had first paired him with Olivia. The 6-year-old German shepherd had been retired after pulling 12 children from the rubble, but had failed to save the woman who would have been his handler's wife. Now, his warm amber eyes rarely left Olivia's face, his posture shifting subtly with her emotions in a silent communication developed through shared grief. David Wilson watched his daughter and her dog with the weary vigilance of a man who had learned the hard way that safety was an illusion. His hands, calloused from years of handling training leads, now typed consulting reports from home so he could be available whenever Olivia's nightmares returned. He'd hoped Maple Grove would offer a fresh start, but he hadn't counted on Amber Foster. Amber Foster strode through Maple Grove Elementary like she owned it, which, in a way, she did, as Principal Foster's only child. The 12-year-old had mastered the art of angelic appearances in adult company while ruling her peers through calculated cruelty. Her loyal lieutenant, Lucas Myers, followed in her wake, his lanky frame and quick eyes missing nothing that could be used as ammunition later. What nobody knew was that beneath his bravado, Lucas carried a crippling secret dogs terrified him to the point of paralysis. The autumn sun cast long shadows across the playground as Olivia clutched her backpack closer to her chest. It was only her 3rd day at Maple Grove Elementary, but she'd already learned that the swing set was terrible territory, too exposed, too central, too close to where Amber Foster held court among her admirers. Instead, Olivia made her way toward the shade of an ancient oak tree at the far edge of the playground, close enough to the fence line that she could occasionally glimpse Shadow's alert ears where he waited patiently just beyond school property. "Hey, new girl," called a voice that had already become familiar for all the wrong reasons. "What's in the secret book?" Olivia hunched her shoulders, quickening her pace, but Amber was faster. The taller girl slid into her path with practiced ease, flicking her blonde ponytail over one shoulder. "I asked you a question," Amber said, her smile friendly enough to fool any teacher glancing their way. "Don't they teach manners wherever you came from?" "It's just drawings," Olivia mumbled, eyes fixed on her worn sneakers. Lucas appeared then, materializing at Amber's side like a shadow himself. "Let's see," he said, reaching for the sketchbook with nimble fingers. He was quick. Olivia's grip broke before she could tighten it. The sketchbook fell open to her most recent drawing, Shadow standing protectively beside a woman with kind eyes and a bright smile, the mother she would never see again, except in her art and memories. "Is this your mommy?" Amber asked with exaggerated sweetness, her finger jabbing at the page. "And your precious doggie, do you think your dog is your guardian angel or something stupid like that?" The laughter that followed burned in Olivia's ears. She reached for the book, but Lucas held it higher. "Guys, she talks to her dog," he announced, loud enough for nearby children to hear. "Like, has actual conversations. I heard her yesterday at the fence." "That's weird," Amber declared, her verdict immediately echoed by the gathering crowd. "Maybe she thinks her dog can talk back." "Do you think your dog is a person, crazy girl?" Olivia's fingers curled into fists at her sides. The familiar pressure built behind her eyes, but she refused to cry. Not here. Not in front of them. "Give it back," she whispered. Lucas pretended not to hear, flipping through pages where Olivia had sketched Shadow in various poses alert, sleeping, watching the horizon. Then he stopped at a detailed drawing of the school collapse, rendered with the terrible precision of someone who couldn't forget a single detail. "What's this supposed to be?" he asked, his voice faltering slightly as he recognized the tragedy. Amber snatched the book for a better look. "Oh, I know. You're that girl. The one whose mom died in that school that fell down." Her voice dropped to a theatrical whisper. "My mom told me about you." The circle of children went silent, some backing away as if death might be contagious. Olivia's breath came faster now, the edges of her vision darkening in the familiar way that preceded her panic attacks. Across the playground, a low, steady growl emanated from beyond the fence. "Can your dog even come to school?" Lucas asked suddenly, his expression shifting as he glanced nervously toward the fence where Shadow's dark form was now fully visible. Ears forward, attention locked on the group surrounding Olivia. "He's not allowed," Amber said with sudden authority. "My mom says no dogs on school property. It's against the rules." With a sudden, deliberate movement, Lucas tore the drawing of Olivia's mother from the sketchbook. The ripping sound cut through the playground noise like a gunshot. "Oops," he said, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face as he saw Olivia's expression. It was almost as if he hadn't meant to go that far, but Amber's approving laugh hardened his resolve. From beyond the fence, Shadow's growl deepened into a bark, sharp, authoritative, unmistakable in its warning. Several children jumped, including Lucas, whose face drained of color. "Control your mutt," Amber snapped, but her voice wavered slightly. The school bell rang, signaling the end of recess. As the children dispersed, Amber dropped the sketchbook onto the dirt. "Better keep that dog away from school," she said, "or my mom will have him taken away." Olivia knelt in the dirt, carefully gathering the torn pieces of her drawing, her hands trembling. By the time she looked up, a tall figure was approaching Ms. Harper, her new teacher, moving with purpose across the playground. "Everything okay here, Olivia?" Ms. Harper asked, her keen eyes taking in the scattered art supplies and the torn paper. Olivia nodded automatically, the lie as familiar as breathing. Adults asking meant well, but telling never helped. It only made things worse. That evening, David Wilson found the torn drawing carefully taped together on Olivia's desk. His daughter was already asleep, one arm thrown protectively over Shadow's massive form at the foot of her bed. The German Shepherd's eyes opened, meeting David's gaze with an intelligence that exceeded most humans. In that silent exchange between man and dog lay an understanding something would have to be done about Maple Grove Elementary. The playground had fallen silent except for the rhythmic creak of empty swings pushed by the autumn breeze. Most children had already boarded buses or been collected by parents, but Olivia lingered near the fence line. Her fingers threaded through the chain links as Shadow pressed his muzzle against her hand from the other side. These few moments before her father arrived were precious, a brief reunion after the long school day apart. "Well, if it isn't Crazy Girl and her bodyguard," Amber's voice cut through the peaceful moment like a knife. She approached with Lucas trailing behind, his eyes darting nervously between Olivia and the German Shepherd. "Leave me alone," Olivia said quietly, withdrawing her hand from the fence. Shadow's ears flattened against his skull, sensing her tension. "Or what?" Amber challenged, stepping closer. "Your dog can't help you in here." "There's a fence between you, remember?" Lucas hung back, his usual swagger diminished by Shadow's fixed stare. "Come on, Amber. Let's go. My mom's waiting." "In a minute," Amber replied, her attention fixed on Olivia. "I haven't finished my conversation with Dog Whisperer here." She took another step forward, deliberate, invading Olivia's space. "My mom says your dad is trying to get special permission for that mutt to come to school. That's not happening." Shadow's growl rumbled low and steady, a warning vibration that seemed to travel through the ground itself. Olivia shook her head slightly, the signal for him to stand down, but her own heart was racing. "He's not a mutt," Olivia whispered, her voice stronger than usual. "His name is Shadow." "I don't care if his name is Lassie," Amber scoffed. "He's not special, and neither are you." The push came without warning, a sharp shove against Olivia's shoulders that sent her stumbling backward. She didn't fall, but the deliberate aggression was like striking a match near gasoline. Before anyone could react, Shadow launched himself at the fence with a force that made the metal sing. His powerful body straining against the barrier as a bark exploded from his throat, not the familiar warning, but the commanding sound he'd been trained to use in emergencies. Lucas let out a strangled yelp, backpedaling so fast he tripped over his own feet and landed hard on the asphalt. "Get it away!" "Sus!" he screamed, his face contorted with genuine terror as he scrambled backward on all fours. Shadow hadn't breached the fence, but the violence of his reaction was enough. The dog's military training had transformed him in an instant from gentle companion to formidable guardian. His hackles raised, teeth bared in a display that spoke to ancient human fears. "Lucas!" Amber rushed to her friend, helping him up as he continued to stare at Shadow in horror. "Are you okay? Did it hurt you?" "That dog attacked me," Lucas shouted, loud enough to be heard across the schoolyard. It tried to get through the fence. Ms. Harper appeared as if summoned by the commotion, her brisk walk turning into a run as she took in the scene. "What happened here?" she demanded, placing herself between the children and the fence, where Shadow had now settled into a vigilant stance, no longer lunging but clearly on alert. "Her dog attacked Lucas," Amber insisted, her arm around the shaking boy's shoulders. "He's dangerous. Lucas was just standing there, and that dog went crazy." Olivia shook her head desperately. "No, they were bullying me. Amber pushed me. Shadow was protecting me." "The dog never touched me," Lucas admitted shakily, his terror seemingly making it impossible to maintain the lie completely. "But it tried to. It wanted to kill me. I could see it in its eyes." "Ms." Harper's gaze moved between the three children, calculation evident in her expression. "Olivia, I need you to step away from the fence. Please, Lucas. Are you injured?" "No," he mumbled, looking away. "Amber, go find your mother. Now." "Ms." Harper's tone left no room for argument. After Amber had departed, she knelt beside Lucas. "Are you certain the dog didn't harm you? Not even a scratch through the fence?" Lucas shook his head, still trembling. "No, but it would have, if the fence wasn't there." He trailed off, swallowing hard. "Ms." Harper turned to Olivia. "I need to know exactly what happened." Before Olivia could respond, Principal Foster arrived with Amber in tow, her heels clicking authoritatively against the asphalt. "What is this about a dog attack on school grounds?" she demanded, her sharp gaze immediately fixing on Shadow, who remained alert behind the fence. "Mom, that dog tried to attack Lucas," Amber insisted, clinging to her mother's arm. "It's dangerous." David Wilson's truck pulled into the parking lot at that moment, his arrival perfectly timed. He approached quickly, taking in the tense tableau with the experienced eye of someone who had assessed volatile situations before. "What's happening?" he asked, placing a steady hand on Olivia's shoulder. "Mr. Wilson," Principal Foster began, her voice clipped. "Your daughter's dog has become a serious safety concern. It apparently attempted to attack a student today." "That's not true," Olivia protested, tears finally spilling over. "They were bullying me. Amber pushed me. Shadow was protecting me." David's expression tightened. "Is my daughter saying she was physically assaulted on school grounds?" Principal Foster's eyes narrowed. "There are conflicting accounts of what happened. What's not in dispute is that your dog displayed aggressive behavior toward students. I'm afraid I must insist it not be brought anywhere near school property again." "With all due respect," David replied, his calm voice belied by the tension in his jaw. "Shadow is a trained service animal who responds to threats. If he reacted, there was a reason." "Dad," Olivia whispered, tugging at his sleeve. "Lucas is afraid of dogs. Really afraid. You should have seen his face." David glanced at the boy, noting his still pale complexion and trembling hands, signs of genuine fear. Not just a performance for adult benefit. "I'm filing a formal complaint," Principal Foster announced, straightening to her full height. "That animal is to remain away from school grounds until further notice. This will be addressed by the school board." As if sensing he had become the center of a crucial decision, Shadow sat perfectly still, his military training evident in his disciplined posture. Only his eyes moved, tracking each human in the standoff with intelligent assessment. Ms. Harper stepped forward then, her voice measured and professional. "Perhaps we should discuss this further in your office. Rebecca, there are protocols for service animals that we should review before making permanent decisions." Something in her tone made Principal Foster pause. "Fine, Mr. Wilson. My office. Now." As they walked toward the school building, David kept his hand on Olivia's shoulder, a silent promise of support. Behind them, Shadow remained at the fence, watching until his family disappeared from view. The German shepherd's posture never relaxed, his training keeping him on alert long after the immediate threat had passed. The afternoon sun slanted through the blinds in Principal Foster's office, casting tiger-striped shadows across the polished desk where a folder labeled Wilson Olivia lay open. David sat with one arm protectively around his daughter's shoulders, his posture relaxed, but his eyes alert the stance of a man accustomed to high-stakes negotiations. "Mr. Wilson," Principal Foster began, her reading glasses perched on the end of her nose, "I understand your attachment to the animal. But Maple Grove Elementary has clear policies regarding pets on school property." "Shadow isn't a pet," David corrected gently. "He's a trained service animal with specialized certification for trauma support." Ms. Harper, who had positioned herself by the window, spoke up. "Rebecca, there are federal protections for service animals that supersede school policy. If Shadow qualifies—" "If," Principal Foster emphasized, raising one manicured finger. "The documentation I have here indicates he was a search and rescue dog, not a certified therapy animal." David extracted a folder from his messenger bag. "His certifications are here, including his recent retraining for emotional support specific to childhood trauma. Shadow provides essential support for Olivia's diagnosed PTSD." Principal Foster's expression softened almost imperceptibly as she glanced at Olivia, who sat unnaturally still, her eyes fixed on her interlaced fingers. Nevertheless, what happened today raises serious safety concerns. Lucas Myers was terrified. "Because Lucas is afraid of dogs," Olivia said quietly, looking up for the first time. "Really afraid. Not just a little scared." All three adults turned toward her with varying expressions of surprise. "How do you know that Ms.?" Harper asked gently. "I saw his face when Shadow barked. It wasn't normal scared. It was—" Olivia searched for the word. "Like he couldn't breathe scared." David nodded thoughtfully. That would explain the extreme reaction to what was actually very controlled behavior from Shadow. He barked and hit the fence, but he didn't try to climb it or dig under it, which he's fully capable of doing if he perceived a genuine threat. Principal Foster's lips pressed into a thin line. "Regardless of Lucas's fears, we cannot have an animal, however well trained, lunging at our fence and frightening students. The liability alone—" "With respect," Ms. Harper interrupted, her tone shifting subtly to something more authoritative. "I believe we need to consider all factors here." She moved away from the window, straightening her posture. "Mr. Wilson, may I speak with you privately for a moment?" Principal Foster frowned. "Catherine, this is hardly the time." "It's directly relevant," Ms. Harper insisted. 5 minutes. Rebecca, please." Something in her tone caused Principal Foster to acquiesce with a curt nod. "Olivia can wait in the library. Mrs. Simmons is there for the after-school program." After Olivia had been escorted out, Ms. Harper closed the door and turned to face them both. Her professional demeanor seemed to sharpen, like a blade being unsheathed. "Rebecca, David, I need to disclose something that affects this situation." She took a breath. "My name is Dr. Catherine Harper. I'm a licensed child psychologist specializing in childhood trauma, and I've been Olivia's therapist for the past 18 months. David stared at her, comprehension dawning slowly. "You're Dr. Harper, from the Trauma Center. But why would you be teaching 4th grade in Maple Grove?" "I requested this placement when I learned Olivia would be transferring here," she explained. "With permission from my clinical director. Of course. It's part of an extended study I'm conducting on trauma recovery in educational settings." Principal Foster's expression had transformed from irritation to shock. "You never mentioned any of this during your interview." "The school board president is aware," Dr. Harper replied smoothly. "Confidentiality was essential to preserve the integrity of my observations. I've been monitoring Olivia's transition and integration, and I've also been observing patterns of social interaction in your school. Rebecca," the implied criticism hung in the air between them. "Are you suggesting," Principal Foster began defensively. "I'm stating professionally that Shadow's presence is instrumental to Olivia's recovery." Dr. Harper interrupted. "And that based on my observations over the past 3 weeks. There is a concerning pattern of bullying behavior that has gone unaddressed." David leaned forward. "Dr. Harper, with all due respect, using my daughter as a research subject without my knowledge—" "Your consent is on file," she countered, producing a tablet from her bag and navigating to a document bearing his signature. "Paragraph 4 specifically covers continued therapeutic observation in educational settings. I couldn't disclose my dual role initially without compromising the naturalistic observation phase." Principal Foster's face had flushed an alarming shade of red. "This is highly irregular. Catherine Dr. Harper, the school board will need to review this arrangement immediately." "They're welcome to," Dr. Harper agreed calmly. "In the meantime, I am officially recommending Shadow be permitted on school grounds as a therapeutic support animal under my professional supervision." David ran a hand through his hair, processing this unexpected development. "So for 3 weeks, you've been watching my daughter struggle with bullying and said nothing?" "I've intervened subtly where necessary," Dr. Harper replied. "But yes, I needed to observe the natural social dynamics first. Today's incident crosses the line into territory requiring direct intervention." A heavy silence filled the office as the 3 adults considered their positions. Finally, Principal Foster spoke, her voice strained but professional. "This will need to go before the school board. I can't unilaterally overturn school policy, even with your professional recommendation." She looked pointedly at Dr. Harper. "In the meantime, the dog must remain off school property." "Shadow," David corrected quietly. "Shadow," Principal Foster amended, "must remain off school property until the board reaches a decision. I can schedule an emergency meeting for next Friday." 10 days, David calculated aloud. "What about Olivia's well-being in the meantime?" Dr. Harper stepped in smoothly. "I'll arrange additional support during school hours. And perhaps we can find a compromise for Shadow to remain close by without technically being on school grounds." Principal Foster hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. "The school property line ends 6 feet beyond the fence. If Shadow remains beyond that point, I cannot object." As they left the office, David pulled Dr. Harper aside in the empty hallway. "You should have told me who you were from the beginning." "I know," she acknowledged, genuine regret in her expression. "But my research shows that knowledge of ongoing therapeutic observation changes behavior patterns in both children and caregivers. I needed authentic data." "My daughter isn't data," David said firmly. "No," Dr. Harper agreed. "She's a remarkably resilient child who's been through hell and is finding her way back. And shadow is a critical part of that journey." The 10 days leading up to the school board meeting stretched like an eternity. David arranged his work schedule to bring Shadow to the designated spot beyond the school fence each morning and afternoon, a compromise that satisfied the letter if not the spirit of Principal Foster's prohibition. For Olivia, the separation remained painful, her eyes constantly drifting toward the window where she could occasionally glimpse Shadow's patient silhouette. The playground dynamics had shifted subtly after the incident. Some children gave Olivia a wider berth, whispering about the crazy girl with the attack dog. Others, however, seemed drawn by curiosity, especially those who had witnessed Shadow's protective display. "Is it true your dog saved people from a collapsed building?" asked a freckle-faced girl named Sarah during lunch on the 3rd day after the incident. Olivia nodded, pushing her food around her plate. 12 kids. "From a school like this one?" "Was he scary when he did it?" Sarah pressed, leaning forward with fascination rather than fear. "No," Olivia replied softly. "He was gentle. My dad says rescue dogs have to be super gentle when they find people who are hurt or scared." The conversation had attracted other curious listeners, children drifting toward their table with lunch trays and wide eyes. For the first time since arriving at Maple Grove, Olivia found herself surrounded not by taunts, but by genuine interest. Across the cafeteria, Amber Foster watched with narrowed eyes, her usual court diminished by the gravitational pull of Olivia's story. Lucas sat beside her, picking at his lunch without enthusiasm, dark circles under his eyes suggesting troubled sleep. "Everyone's making such a big deal about a stupid dog," Amber muttered, stabbing her fork into her pasta with unnecessary force. Lucas said nothing, his gaze fixed on his plate. "What's wrong with you?" Amber demanded, nudging him sharply with her elbow. "You're being weird." "Nothing," Lucas mumbled, but his hand trembled slightly as he reached for his milk carton. "You've been acting strange ever since that dog freaked out," Amber observed, her voice lowering. "Don't tell me you're actually scared of it." Lucas's head snapped up, eyes flashing with something raw and vulnerable before his expression settled back into carefully constructed indifference. "I'm not scared of anything." Later that afternoon, Dr. Harper found Lucas alone in the art room during recess, hunched over a drawing pad. "Not feeling like playground today?" she asked casually, arranging brushes on the supply shelf. Lucas shrugged without looking up. "Just didn't want to." "Doctor?" Harper moved closer, glancing at his drawing dark swirls of black and brown, slashing lines creating a chaotic impression of teeth and claws. She sat down across from him, her movements deliberate and unhurried. "That's powerful," she commented. "Lots of emotion there." Lucas didn't respond, adding another harsh line to the turbulent image. "You know," Dr. Harper continued conversationally, "it's perfectly normal to be afraid of things that have hurt us in the past." His pencil stilled. I'm not afraid. Everyone's afraid of something, she countered gently. I'm afraid of heights myself. Can't even climb a stepladder without getting dizzy. A ghost of a smile touched Lucas's lips before vanishing. That's different. Is it? She tilted her head. Fear comes from somewhere, Lucas. It's our brain's way of protecting us from things that once caused us pain. Lucas remained silent, but his knuckles whitened around the pencil. Would you like to talk about what happened with the dog? She asked, her voice neutral, free of judgment. There's nothing to talk about, Lucas insisted, but his voice cracked slightly. It wanted to attack me. I could tell. Dr. Harper considered him thoughtfully. Shadow is a highly trained rescue dog. In his entire service career, he never once harmed a human being, even under extreme conditions. Lucas looked up sharply. How do you know that? I've reviewed his service record, she replied simply. Part of my job. Well, he doesn't like me, Lucas muttered, returning to his drawing with renewed intensity. Or perhaps, Dr. Harper suggested carefully, he sensed your fear and responded to it. Dogs are remarkably intuitive about human emotions. Lucas's pencil snapped in his grip, the broken point skidding across the paper. I have to go, he announced abruptly, gathering his things with trembling hands. Doctor! Harper didn't try to stop him, but her gaze followed him thoughtfully as he fled the classroom. The night before the school board meeting, David found Olivia sitting on the porch steps with Shadow's massive head resting in her lap. The evening air carried the first real bite of approaching winter, dead leaves skittering across the yard in the gusty wind. Big day tomorrow, David said, settling beside her on the step. Olivia nodded, her fingers working methodically through Shadow's thick fur. What if they say no? David considered his answer carefully. Then we look at alternatives. Maybe a different school, or homeschooling. I don't want to leave, Olivia said, surprising him. I made a friend today, Sarah. She wants to be a veterinarian. David smiled, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. That's good. Friends are important. Shadow needs to be with me at school, Olivia continued, her voice taking on the quiet certainty that sometimes made her seem far older than her years. Not just for me, for him too. David raised an eyebrow. For Shadow. Olivia nodded solemnly. He has nightmares too, Dad. About the school that fell down. About Mom. David felt his throat tighten. Of course Olivia would recognize the signs, the occasional whimpers in Shadow's sleep, the way he sometimes woke suddenly, alert and searching. The dog had been through the same trauma she had lost the same person. We'll do our best tomorrow, David promised, pulling her closer. Dr. Harper, Ms. Harper thinks the board will listen. She's nice, Olivia said thoughtfully. She watches everything, though, like Shadow does. David chuckled softly. That's a pretty apt comparison. As they sat together in the gathering darkness, David couldn't help but wonder what tomorrow would bring. The school board, the community's reaction, Lucas's fear, Amber's hostility, all variables in an equation he couldn't quite solve. But the one constant remained the unbreakable bond between his daughter and the dog who had pulled her from both literal and metaphorical rubble. Inside, the phone rang. Shadow's ears perked up before David even registered the sound. It was Dr. Harper, her voice tight with controlled urgency. David, something's happened. I've just received a disturbing call from another parent. It seems Amber Foster has been organizing some sort of protest for tomorrow's meeting. Several parents are planning to speak against allowing Shadow at school. David sighed heavily. That's hardly surprising. Catherine. There's more, she continued. Lucas Myers hasn't been sleeping. His mother called me directly because he's been having severe nightmares. She mentioned something about a dog attack when he was younger that I think we need to investigate before tomorrow. As David hung up the phone and returned to the porch, he found Olivia had moved closer to Shadow, her small arm thrown protectively around the dog's powerful neck. Tomorrow would indeed be a pivotal day for all of them, a day when the past and present would collide in ways none of them could fully anticipate. The Maple Grove Elementary Gymnasium had been transformed for the evening school board meeting. Folding chairs arranged in neat rows faced a long table where 5 board members sat with expressions ranging from bored to openly curious. Principal Foster occupied a seat at one end, her posture rigid, a thick folder of documents placed precisely before her. At the opposite end sat Superintendent Wallace, a silver-haired man whose kindly appearance belied his reputation for unwavering adherence to district policy. David Wilson sat in the front row, Shadow lying at his feet in perfect downstay position, the dog's service vest immaculate against his dark fur. Olivia sat beside her father, her small hand buried in Shadow's ruff, drawing strength from his solid presence. Doctor. Harper had positioned herself strategically 2 seats away, close enough to offer support, but maintaining the professional distance her dual role demanded. The crowd that had gathered exceeded expectations for a typical board meeting. Word had spread through the small town about the dangerous dog controversy, drawing parents, teachers, and community members with strong opinions on both sides. In the back row, Amber Foster sat between her mother's empty chair and Lucas, whose complexion had taken on a grayish tinge at the sight of Shadow across the room. I call this emergency session of the Maple Grove School Board to order, Superintendent Wallace announced, his voice carrying easily through the gymnasium. We're here to address the request for accommodation of a service animal on school grounds, which conflicts with our long-standing policy regarding animals on campus. David felt Olivia tense beside him as all eyes turned toward Shadow, who remained utterly still, his training evident in every line of his powerful body. Mr. Wilson has submitted documentation regarding his daughter's need for a service animal, the superintendent continued, gesturing toward the stack of papers before him. The board will hear statements from all relevant parties before making a determination. Principal Foster rose first, smoothing her tailored blazer before addressing the room. Maple Grove Elementary has maintained a strict no animals policy for 15 years without incident. This policy exists for good reason to protect student safety and prevent disruptions to the learning environment. She fixed her gaze on Shadow. While I sympathize with the Wilson family's situation, we cannot make exceptions that might endanger other students or create liability issues for the district. David listened calmly, noting how carefully she avoided mentioning her daughter's role in the playground incident. When his turn came to speak, he stood with the quiet confidence of someone accustomed to high-pressure situations. My daughter Olivia suffers from post-traumatic stress disorder following the collapse of her previous school building, an event that claimed her mother's life, he began, his steady voice belying the emotion such words always stirred. Shadow is not just a pet. He's a specially trained service animal who has been instrumental in Olivia's recovery. He gestured toward the documentation. His certifications exceed federal standards for service animals. Before becoming Olivia's companion, Shadow served with distinction in search and rescue operations, including the very school collapse that traumatized my daughter. He helped recover 12 children from that rubble. A murmur ran through the audience. David continued, Shadow does not present a danger to students, like all properly trained service animals. He responds protectively only when his handler is threatened. The incident on the playground occurred after another student physically pushed my daughter, an act of bullying that Shadow responded to appropriately by providing a warning without attempting to breach the fence or cause harm. Several parents exchanged glances, clearly hearing this detail for the first time. Doctor? Harper rose next, her professional demeanor commanding immediate attention. Board members, my name is Dr. Catherine Harper. I'm a licensed child psychologist specializing in childhood trauma, currently serving as Olivia's therapist while conducting research on trauma recovery in educational settings. Another ripple of surprise moved through the audience. Principal Foster's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. In my professional assessment, separation from Shadow during school hours is actively detrimental to Olivia's recovery process. Service animals like Shadow provide consistent emotional regulation support that cannot be replicated by human intervention alone. His presence significantly reduces anxiety, prevents panic attacks, and enables Olivia to function in a classroom environment. Dr. Harper paused, meeting each board member's gaze in turn. Additionally, I've observed concerning patterns of bullying behavior at Maple Grove that have targeted Olivia specifically because of her trauma history. Shadow's presence would mitigate this vulnerability. The gymnasium fell silent as the implications of her statement sank in. Principal Foster's cheeks flushed with angry color. "I'd like to speak," came a tremulous voice from the back of the room. All heads turned as Lucas Myers rose from his seat, his thin frame visibly shaking. His mother, seated beside him, looked startled by his initiative. "Lucas," Principal Foster began cautiously. "You don't have to." "I want to," the boy insisted, his voice strengthening slightly. He made his way to the front, carefully keeping his distance from Shadow, whose ears had perked up with interest. Standing before the board, Lucas looked smaller than his 12 years, his hands thrust deep in his pockets to hide their trembling. "That dog Shadow, he scared me real bad on the playground," he admitted, staring at his shoes. "I thought he was going to attack me." Murmurs of concern rippled through the parents in attendance. David felt Olivia's hand tighten on his arm. "But," Lucas continued, visibly struggling, "I wasn't just standing there like Amber said." He swallowed hard. We were being mean to Olivia. Amber pushed her, and I laughed. The dog was just protecting her." The gymnasium erupted in whispers. Amber's face contorted in betrayal as Principal Foster stared at Lucas in stunned silence. "I'm scared of dogs," Lucas admitted, his voice cracking. "Really scared. When I was little, a dog bit me bad, and I had to get stitches. Every time I see a big dog, I remember it." He looked up finally, his eyes meeting Olivia's across the room. "But that doesn't make it okay to be mean to someone just because they have a dog. My mom says that's called displacement, when you're mean to someone because you're scared of something else." From the back row, Mrs. Myers nodded encouragingly at her son, pride evident in her tear-filled eyes. Before anyone could respond to Lucas's unexpected testimony, the gymnasium doors banged open. All heads turned as Amber Foster stormed out, her face flushed with humiliation. Principal Foster half rose as if to follow, then sank back into her chair, professional duty warring visibly with maternal instinct. The board chairman cleared his throat. "Thank you for your honesty, young man. That can't have been easy." Lucas nodded awkwardly and made his way back to his seat, giving Shadow's corner of the room a wide berth. "I believe we should hear from Olivia herself," Dr. Harper suggested gently. "If she's willing." All eyes turned to the small girl sitting beside her father. Olivia hesitated, then nodded, rising to her feet with one hand still firmly anchored in Shadow's fur. The German shepherd rose with her, moving in perfect synchronization. "Shadow saved me," Olivia said simply, her voice soft but clear in the hushed gymnasium. "Not just from the school that fell down, but from being scared all the time. He knows when I'm going to have a bad dream before I do. He knows when I can't breathe. He makes it so I can come to school at all." She looked down at the dog beside her, drawing strength from his steady presence. "He's not dangerous. He's the opposite of dangerous. He saved 12 kids. He tried to save my mom, too." A woman in the third row dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Even the most skeptical board members seemed moved by the child's quiet testimony. "Would you mind showing us how Shadow helps you, Olivia?" the board chairman asked gently. Olivia nodded and turned to Shadow, whispering a command so softly that only those in the front row could hear it. Immediately, the German shepherd positioned himself against her legs, creating firm pressure that grounded her physically. At another quiet command, he laid his head against her chest, his weight providing the deep pressure therapy that helped regulate her autonomic nervous system during anxiety episodes. "He can smell when I'm getting scared," Olivia explained, her voice steadier now, "before I even know it sometimes. And he knows what to do to make it better." The demonstration continued for several minutes, Shadow responding to nearly imperceptible cues with precise movements that clearly illustrated his specialized training. Even Principal Foster's expression had softened by the time Olivia and Shadow returned to their seats. The board members conferred quietly among themselves before the chairman addressed the room again. "We'll take a 15-minute recess to deliberate, after which we'll announce our decision." As people shuffled about during the break, David knelt beside Olivia. "You did great, kiddo. No matter what they decide, I'm so proud of you." Dr. Harper approached them, speaking in a low voice. "Lucas's testimony may have turned the tide. That kind of honesty from a child is hard to dismiss." David nodded thoughtfully. It took courage for him to admit his fear like that, especially in front of everyone. "Dad," Olivia said suddenly, tugging at his sleeve. Amber ran out. She looked really upset. David and Dr. Harper exchanged concerned glances. "I should check on Rebecca," Dr. Harper said. She must be torn between following her daughter and maintaining her professional role. As Dr. Harper moved away, David noticed Lucas hovering uncertainly nearby, his mother at his side. With a gentle nudge, he encouraged Olivia to approach them. "Hi," Olivia said quietly. Lucas stuffed his hands deeper into his pockets. "Hi." After an awkward pause, he added, "Thanks for not telling everyone I ripped your drawing. That was really mean." "It's okay," Olivia replied. "I fixed it, Mrs." Myers smiled warmly at Olivia. Lucas told me how afraid he's been of dogs since his accident. It was very brave of him to speak up today. Lucas flushed with embarrassment. It wasn't brave. I was just being honest. Shadow, still dutifully at Olivia's side, remained perfectly calm, his intelligent eyes fixed on Lucas with what almost seemed like understanding. The boy glanced nervously at the dog, then back at Olivia. "Does he really know when you're going to have nightmares?" he asked, curiosity momentarily overcoming fear. Olivia nodded. "He wakes me up before they get really bad." "That's—" Lucas searched for the word. "Pretty cool." Actually, the board's deliberation took longer than the promised 15 minutes. When they finally reconvened, tension hung thick in the air. Superintendent Wallace adjusted his microphone, scanning the crowd before speaking. "After careful consideration of all testimony and documentation presented, the board has reached a decision regarding Shadow's presence at Maple Grove Elementary." David felt Olivia's hand slip into his, squeezing tightly. "We recognize the legitimate therapeutic benefit Shadow provides to Olivia Wilson, as documented by qualified medical professionals. We also acknowledge the exemplary training and service record this animal possesses." Principal Foster's expression remained unreadable. "Therefore, the board has voted to approve a conditional exception to our no animals policy, allowing Shadow to accompany Olivia during school hours under the following conditions. First, Shadow must remain directly with Olivia or a designated staff handler at all times. Second, a 3-week trial period will be implemented, during which any incidents will trigger immediate review. Third, Dr. Harper will provide weekly assessments of the arrangement's effectiveness." Relief washed over David's face as Olivia threw her arms around Shadow's neck. Around them, reactions were mixed, some parents nodding approval, others exchanging concerned glances. Lucas's mother gave her son's shoulder a supportive squeeze as he exhaled shakily. "Additionally," the superintendent continued, "this situation has highlighted the need for 2 further actions: a comprehensive review of our bullying prevention programs, which will begin immediately, and the development of a more nuanced service animal policy that aligns with federal guidelines while maintaining appropriate safety measures." As the meeting adjourned, people gathered in small clusters, discussing the unexpected outcome. Dr. Harper approached David with a satisfied smile. "A good result. The conditional approval is actually better than an unconditional one. It establishes precedent for future cases." David nodded, watching Olivia kneel beside Shadow, whispering something in the dog's ear. "I'm just glad it's over." "Not quite," Dr. Harper cautioned, glancing toward the door where Principal Foster stood alone. Her expression troubled. "Rebecca still has to find Amber and deal with what happened here tonight. And tomorrow will be Shadow's first official day at school. We should prepare Olivia for the attention that will bring—" David hadn't considered that angle. "You're right. The last thing she needs is to become even more of a spectacle." As families filtered out of the gymnasium, Principal Foster approached David with measured steps. Her professional mask had slipped slightly, revealing the concerned mother beneath. "Mr. Wilson," she began formally, then seemed to reconsider. "David, I need to apologize for my daughter's behavior toward Olivia. I had no idea—" She broke off, composing herself. "This doesn't excuse anything, but Amber has been struggling since her father left last year. I thought she was handling it better." David recognized the pain in her eyes, the same guilt he often felt, wondering if he was doing enough for Olivia as a single parent. "Kids hide things from us," he said gently, "especially when they're hurting. Principal Foster nodded gratefully. I've gone outside to look for her, but she seems to have disappeared. I need to finish up here, but I'm worried. We can help look, David offered, glancing at Dr. Harper, who nodded in agreement. She's probably just cooling off somewhere on campus, Principal Foster said, though worry lined her face. She knows not to leave school grounds after dark. As the adults spoke, Olivia tugged at her father's sleeve. Dad, she whispered urgently. Shadow's acting weird. David looked down to find the German shepherd on alert, his ears forward, body tense with focused attention. Having worked with service dogs for years, David recognized the posture immediately. Shadow had detected something concerning. What is it, boy? David asked quietly, all other conversations forgotten. What do you sense? Shadow whined, moving toward the gymnasium doors with clear purpose, then looking back at them expectantly. Principal Foster frowned. What's happening? Shadow's alerting to something, David explained, following as the dog led them into the hallway. It could be nothing, but... Dr. Harper's expression sharpened. Could he be sensing Amber? Possibly, David confirmed. Especially if she's distressed. These dogs are trained to detect cortisol and adrenaline spikes. Shadow moved with increasing urgency down the corridor, pausing occasionally to ensure they were following. The dog led them past empty classrooms, through the cafeteria, and finally toward a rarely used rear exit that opened onto the old storage buildings behind the school. The maintenance area, Principal Foster's concern deepened. Amber knows those buildings are off limits after hours. The electrical systems are scheduled for replacement next month. Shadow's pace quickened, his body language shifting from alert to urgent. Outside in the darkening evening, he led them directly toward the largest storage building, a dilapidated structure housing old desks, outdated textbooks, and seasonal decorations. Amber wouldn't go in there, Principal Foster insisted, though doubt crept into her voice. It's always locked. But as they approached, the padlock hung open on the rusty hasp, the door slightly ajar. Shadow stopped, looking back at them with unmistakable intensity. She might not be alone, David said quietly, the skin on the back of his neck prickling with sudden foreboding. From inside the building came a sound that froze them all in place, a muffled cry, followed by a crash and the distinctive crackle of electrical sparks. Amber. Principal Foster lunged forward, but David caught her arm. Wait, he cautioned. Shadow. Check. The German shepherd responded instantly to the command, slipping through the partially open door with practiced efficiency. Seconds later, his sharp bark conveyed the message his training had taught him to deliver in only one circumstance: humans in danger. The ancient storage building loomed like a shadow against the darkening sky, its weathered boards groaning in the autumn wind. Inside, the air hung thick with dust and the acrid smell of electrical burning. David pushed through the door first, Principal Foster close behind him, her professional composure shattered by maternal panic. Amber, she called, voice breaking. Amber, answer me. The building's interior was a labyrinth of forgotten school supplies, stacked desks forming towers in the gloom, shelves overflowing with moldering textbooks, holiday decorations spilling from cardboard boxes like ghosts of celebrations past. Shadow moved with purpose through the maze, his training evident in the efficient way he scanned the space, nose working the air currents. A sudden crash from the far corner was followed by a terrified scream. Principal Foster bolted toward the sound, but David caught her arm, pulling her back as a shower of sparks cascaded from exposed wiring overhead. "The electrical system," he warned, eyeing the ancient junction box where frayed wires dangled dangerously. "Rebecca, stay back. Shadow. Find." The German shepherd darted forward, disappearing around a mountain of stacked chairs. His sharp bark guided them as David navigated carefully through the debris, mindful of the sparking wires. They rounded the corner to find a scene of unfolding disaster. Amber stood frozen on a metal desk, her face ghostly white in the dim light. Below her, old paint cans and turpentine bottles lay scattered where they'd fallen from a shelf, their flammable contents seeping across the wooden floor. Most terrifying of all, Lucas Myers lay crumpled in the corner, unconscious, a thin trickle of blood running from his temple where he'd struck an exposed pipe. Shadow stood between them and the growing danger, his posture alert but calm, a living barrier against panic. "Amber, don't move," David commanded, his voice steady. "Those sparks could ignite the solvents." "He fell," Amber sobbed, pointing to Lucas. "We were just exploring. And then the shelves collapsed, and he tried to catch me. But he hit his head, and now he won't wake up." Principal Foster made a strangled sound, her eyes darting between her daughter and the unconscious boy. "We need to get them out. Now." Dr. Harper appeared in the doorway behind them, taking in the situation with one sweeping glance. "I've called 911, she reported. "Fire department is on the way, but they're coming from the county station. At least 15 minutes. A spark fell from the ceiling, landing with a hiss in a puddle of paint thinner. A small blue flame flickered to life, growing with alarming speed. "No time," David decided. "Rebecca, go around to the left. Stay low. Get Lucas. I'll get Amber." "But the fire," Principal Foster began. "Shadow, secure," David commanded. Instantly. The German shepherd moved to Lucas, gently taking the collar of the boy's shirt in his teeth, the secure and transport grip he'd been trained to use with unconscious victims. Amber screamed at the sight. "No! Get that dog away from him!" "Amber, listen to me," David said firmly. "Shadow is trained for this. He's going to help Lucas. You need to trust me and come down from there." The flame spread faster now, licking across the floor in blue-orange tongues. Smoke billowed from burning paint, thick and toxic. Principal Foster had reached Lucas, kneeling beside him as Shadow maintained his gentle grip on the boy's collar. "His pulse is steady," she reported, her voice tight with fear. "But we can't move him if there's spinal injury. We don't have a choice," David countered, edging closer to Amber. "That smoke will kill us before the fire does." "Doctors—" Harper had entered the building now, a damp cloth pressed to her mouth. "The exit behind us is clear, but not for long. We need to move." A terrible cracking sound drew all eyes upward. Ancient wooden beams, dried by decades and weakened by moisture damage, groaned above them. The fire had found the structure itself. "Amber," David urged, reaching the desk where she stood trembling. "Come with me now." Finally. The girl nodded, allowing him to lift her down. As her feet touched the floor, a massive beam gave way, crashing between them and the others, sending up a wall of flame that instantly cut the storage room in two. "Dad!" Olivia's voice cried from the doorway, sending ice through David's veins. "Stay outside!" he shouted, clutching Amber against him as the flames surged higher. But Olivia had already entered, Shadow's leash gripped in her small hand. The German shepherd stood rigid, torn between his training to obey and his instinct to protect. "Shadow, help," Olivia commanded, releasing the leash. Without hesitation, the dog bounded forward, navigating the burning debris with uncanny precision. He reached David and Amber, circling them once before leading the way toward a narrow gap between fallen shelving units, an escape route invisible in the thickening smoke. "Follow him," David ordered, pushing Amber ahead. "Stay low. Breathe through your shirt." On the other side of the flaming barricade, Dr. Harper and Principal Foster had retreated toward the main entrance with Lucas, the boy beginning to stir in their arms. Shadow led David and Amber on a winding path through the burning maze, his powerful body forcing aside obstacles, his training keeping him focused despite the chaos. They emerged into clearer air near a boarded-up window. Shadow pawed at the rotting boards, indicating the way out. David kicked at the weathered wood, splintering it enough to create an opening. "Go!" he commanded, lifting Amber toward the gap. The girl squeezed through, coughing violently as she tumbled onto the grass outside. David turned back, searching for Shadow in the thickening smoke. "Come on, boy!" But the German shepherd had already disappeared back into the inferno, his dark form swallowed by flames and shadow. "Shadow," David called, before a coughing fit doubled him over. The smoke was too thick now, the air unbreathable. With a last desperate look into the burning building, he forced himself through the window opening, collapsing onto the grass beside Amber. Outside, chaos reigned. Parents from the meeting had gathered, holding back terrified children. Dr. Harper and Principal Foster had emerged with Lucas. The boy, now conscious but confused. A distant siren wailed, promising help that would arrive too late. "Where's Olivia?" David demanded, struggling to his feet. "Where's my daughter? Doctor—" Harper pointed toward the main entrance, where firefighters were now arriving, unfurling hoses with practiced efficiency. "She was right behind us, but then she turned back. She said Shadow needed her." Horror washed over David like ice water. "She went back in Olivia." He lunged toward the building, only to be restrained by two parents. "You can't go in there," one shouted. "The roof is about to collapse." As if summoned by those words, a terrible groaning filled the air. The ancient structure seemed to sigh, timber crying out as supports failed. The assembled crowd gasped as the roof began to cave inward, flames shooting upward into the night sky. "Olivia!" David screamed, fighting against the hands that held him back. In that moment of pure despair, a shadow moved at the far side of the building, low to the ground, pushing through underbrush beside the foundation. A dark form emerged, trailing smoke. Shadow limped into view, his fur singed, his powerful body trembling with exhaustion, and clutched firmly but gently in his jaws. Her shirt gripped in the same rescue hold he'd used with Lucas. Was Olivia unconscious? Soot-stained, but alive? "Oh my God!" Dr. Harper breathed, rushing forward with David as Shadow gently laid Olivia on the grass. His duty fulfilled. David fell to his knees beside his daughter, fingers searching desperately for a pulse. "She's breathing," he choked out, gathering her limp form against his chest. "She's breathing." Shadow collapsed beside them, his sides heaving with painful effort, eyes never leaving Olivia's face. Paramedics swarmed around them, oxygen masks and stretchers appearing as if by magic. As they lifted Olivia onto a backboard, her eyelids fluttered, a weak cough shaking her small frame. "Shadow," she whispered, reaching blindly. "Where's Shadow?" The German shepherd struggled to his feet at the sound of her voice, pushing past the paramedics to touch his nose to her hand. One of the emergency workers tried to move him away, but David intervened. "Let him stay with her," he insisted. "He's the reason she's alive." As they loaded Olivia into the ambulance, David turned to find Shadow stumbling, his powerful legs finally giving way. The dog's breathing had become shallow and labored, his magnificent coat scorched and matted. With a low whine, Shadow laid his head on his paws, exhaustion and smoke inhalation claiming their toll. "We need another transport," David shouted, kneeling beside his faithful companion. "The dog needs emergency care." But even as veterinary technicians from the crowd rushed forward, Shadow's eyes remained fixed on the ambulance where Olivia had disappeared, his sole focus still on the child he had sworn to protect, even as darkness closed in around him. Time seemed to stretch and compress in the antiseptic hallways of Maple County Hospital. David paced the waiting room, the smell of smoke still clinging to his clothes, his eyes fixed on the double doors where doctors had disappeared with Olivia nearly 2 hours ago. Each time they swung open, he froze, hope and dread warring within him. Each time, it was someone else's news, someone else's relief or grief. "Doctor." Harper sat nearby, her professional calm belied by the nervous rhythm her fingers tapped against her knee. "She's going to be all right." "David," she said. Not for the first time. Olivia's breathing was stable in the ambulance. Smoke inhalation can be serious, but children are remarkably resilient. David nodded mechanically, his thoughts divided between his daughter and Shadow. The German shepherd had been rushed to Riverdale Veterinary Emergency Clinic, the closest facility equipped for critical care. The last update from the veterinarian had been guardedly optimistic. Shadow was receiving oxygen and treatment for burns, but the next 24 hours would be critical. Mr. Wilson, a tired-looking doctor in blue scrubs, emerged through the double doors. "Your daughter is stabilized. We've treated her for moderate smoke inhalation and minor burns on her hands and forearms. She's asking for you and for her dog." Relief buckled David's knees, forcing him to grasp the nearest chair for support. "Can I see her?" "Of course. She'll need to stay overnight for observation, but barring complications, you should be able to take her home tomorrow." The doctor hesitated. "She's quite distressed about the dog." "Is there any news you can share with her?" "Shadow's in treatment at Riverdale," David replied. He's fighting." The doctor nodded sympathetically. "I understand. I'll have one of our child life specialists available if she needs additional support processing everything that's happened." Olivia lay small and pale against the hospital sheets, an oxygen mask covering half her face, bandages swathing her slender arms. Her eyes, so like her mother's, opened as David entered, immediately searching the space behind him. "Shadow?" she asked, her voice muffled by the mask. David sat gently on the edge of the bed, taking her unbandaged fingers in his. "He's at the animal hospital, sweetheart. The vets are taking very good care of him." Her eyes filled with tears. "He came back for me, Dad. When the roof started falling, he found me. He knew exactly what to do." A small sob escaped her. "Is he going to die?" The raw fear in her question pierced David's heart. After all Olivia had endured, losing her mother, changing schools, facing bullies, Shadow had become her one certainty, her anchor in a world turned unfamiliar and frightening. The thought of losing him, too, was unbearable. "Shadow is very strong," David said carefully, unwilling to offer false promises but desperate to ease her distress. "He's getting the best care possible, Doctor." Harper entered quietly, nodding a greeting to Olivia. "Your father's right, and I've just spoken with Principal Foster. The entire school is pulling for both of you." "Where's Amber?" Olivia asked unexpectedly. "And Lucas? Are they okay?" "They're both fine," Dr. Harper assured her. "Lucas has a mild concussion, but he's already been released. Amber has some minor burns and smoke inhalation like you. She's actually just down the hall." A soft knock at the door interrupted them. Principal Foster stood in the doorway, her usual immaculate appearance disheveled, soot still streaking her blazer. Her eyes were red-rimmed from crying or smoke, perhaps both. "May I come in?" she asked hesitantly. David nodded, watching as she approached Olivia's bed with uncharacteristic hesitation. "Olivia," Principal Foster began, her professional facade crumbling under the weight of genuine emotion, "I don't even know how to begin thanking you and Shadow." "You saved my daughter's life tonight." "Shadow did," Olivia corrected softly. "He's a hero." Principal Foster nodded, wiping at her eyes. "Yes, he certainly is. And the school board has already called an emergency session for tomorrow. They want to completely revise our service animal policy. Shadow will be welcomed at Maple Grove not just as an exception, but as an honored member of our community when he recovers." She emphasized the last words with determined optimism. "Mrs. Foster." Olivia's voice strengthened slightly. "Can I tell you something?" "Of course, dear." Shadow knew Amber was in trouble before anyone else did. He sensed it somehow. Olivia's eyes took on the distant look that appeared whenever she processed difficult memories. "That's what he's trained for. Finding people who need help." Principal Foster's composure faltered. "I've been so wrong," she admitted. "About Shadow. About you, and I'm ashamed to say about what was happening with Amber and the other children. I should have seen the bullying. I should have done more. You're doing it now," Dr. Harper interjected gently. "That's what matters moving forward." Another knock drew their attention to the door, where Lucas stood uncertainly, a white bandage stark against his temple. Sorry," he mumbled. The nurse said it was okay to visit for a minute. His mother hovered protectively behind him. Olivia offered a small wave, her expression warming at the sight of her former tormentor, looking so vulnerable. Lucas approached the bed with halting steps, his usual bravado absent. "I wanted to say thank you," he began awkwardly. "And I'm really sorry for, well, everything." He swallowed hard. "Your dog, Shadow, he didn't hurt me, even though I was such a jerk to you. He just protected me." "That's what he's trained to do," Olivia explained softly. "Save people." Lucas nodded, his eyes downcast. "When I was little, a dog attacked me. It was really bad. I had to get like 50 stitches. He gestured vaguely to his shoulder. Ever since then, I've been scared of all dogs. especially big ones like Shadow. I understand, Olivia said, with a wisdom beyond her years. I'm scared of buildings falling down because of what happened to my mom. The simple equation of their respective fears created a bridge of understanding between the two children, more effective than any adult intervention could have achieved. "Is Shadow going to be okay?" Lucas asked hesitantly. "We hope so," David answered, touched by the boy's genuine concern. "The burns and smoke inhalation are serious, but he's receiving excellent care." Mrs. Myers stepped forward. "Lucas and I were talking on the way here. We'd like to help with Shadow's veterinary bills." "It's the least we can do." "That's very kind," David began. "But actually," Dr. Harper interrupted, a small smile playing at her lips, "I've just received an interesting update about that." She held up her phone. "It seems our community has been busy. A local business owner started an online fundraiser for Shadow's medical expenses an hour ago. It's already raised over $12,000. David stared at her in disbelief. 12,000? People want to help. "Doctor," Harper explained, "Shadow isn't just your service dog anymore. He's become something of a town hero." A nurse appeared in the doorway, gesturing apologetically. "I'm sorry, but Olivia needs to rest now. You can continue visits in the morning." As the visitors filtered out, promising to return tomorrow, David settled into the chair beside Olivia's bed, prepared for a long night's vigil. She drifted toward sleep, the oxygen mask fogging rhythmically with each breath. But her eyes snapped open suddenly. "Dad," she whispered urgently, "I need to tell you something important about Shadow." David leaned closer. "What is it, sweetheart?" "When we were in the fire, when I couldn't find my way out," her voice trembled with the memory, "Shadow came for me. But then he did something strange. He took me a different way than where we came in, like he already knew the building." David frowned, puzzled. "What do you mean? He knew exactly where to go, even with all the smoke. And when we got trapped by some fallen stuff, he pushed me down really low to the ground and made me crawl through this tiny space." Olivia's eyes grew distant with the memory. It was like he'd done it before. A chill that had nothing to do with the hospital's air conditioning ran through David. "Try to sleep now," he soothed, stroking her hair. "We can talk more tomorrow." After Olivia had finally drifted off, David stepped into the hallway, scrolling through his phone to a bookmark he'd nearly forgotten. It was an old news article about the school collapse where his wife had died, the same disaster where Shadow had rescued 12 children before being pulled from service due to his handler's concerns that the trauma had affected him too deeply. The article included a grainy photo of Shadow being led away from the rubble, his dark coat gray with dust. In the background stood a much younger Lucas Myers, clutched in his mother's arms as paramedics tended to them both. David stared at the image, understanding dawning like a slow sunrise. Shadow hadn't just been trained for emergencies like the storage building fire. He had experienced almost the exact same scenario before, and somewhere in Lucas's traumatized memory, blocked by fear and time, was the knowledge that a German shepherd had once pulled him from danger very similar to tonight's. "It was him all along," David whispered to the empty corridor. "Shadow was the dog that saved Lucas in the first collapse." The revelation struck with the force of physical impact. Shadow's reaction to Lucas on the playground hadn't been aggression. It had been recognition. The dog had somehow sensed the connection between past and present. had tried to protect not just Olivia but also the boy he'd rescued years before. As dawn broke over Maple Grove, painting the hospital walls with pale golden light, David Wilson sat beside his sleeping daughter, piecing together fragments of a story far more complex and interconnected than any of them had realized. The past hadn't just followed them to this small town, it had been waiting for them, creating a circle that was now, finally, complete. Autumn gave way to winter in Maple Grove, the season's first snow dusting the town in a gentle blanket of white. 3 months had passed since the storage building fire. 3 months of healing, both physical and emotional, for everyone involved. The community had rallied around the Wilson family in ways David couldn't have imagined when they'd first arrived as strangers in this small town. Riverdale Veterinary Emergency Clinic had become a second home during those first critical weeks. Shadow's recovery had been painstakingly slow, his powerful body weakened by smoke damage to his lungs and second-degree burns along his left flank. For 7 days. David had divided his time between Olivia's bedside and the veterinary clinic, sleeping in uncomfortable chairs, subsisting on vending machine coffee and the casseroles that appeared mysteriously on their porch each evening. On the 8th day, when the veterinarian had finally pronounced Shadow stable enough for discharge, the German shepherd had risen shakily to his feet, his unwavering focus on finding Olivia overriding his physical discomfort. The reunion in the Wilsons' living room. Olivia on the couch with her own bandaged arms outstretched, Shadow limping determinedly toward her, had reduced even Dr. Harper to tears. Today marked another milestone. Exactly 1 year had passed since Olivia and Shadow had first walked through the doors of Maple Grove Elementary. The anniversary had been deliberately chosen for today's ceremony. "Are you ready?" David asked, adjusting Olivia's scarf against the December chill. They stood at the entrance to the school gymnasium, transformed today from its usual utilitarian purpose into a space of celebration. Colorful banners hung from the rafters, and rows of chairs faced a small stage where Principal Foster waited with the superintendent and school board members. Olivia nodded, her hand resting confidently on Shadow's head. The German shepherd had recovered most of his former strength, though his once perfect coat now bore a patch of silver-gray scars across his left side. Shadow wore his service vest proudly, recently adorned with a special patch that marked him as the official Maple Grove Elementary Therapy Dog, a position created specifically for him following the fire. "They're all staring," Olivia whispered as they walked down the center aisle. David smiled encouragingly. "Because they're proud of you both. This is a good thing. Remember." The gymnasium had filled with students, teachers, and community members. Near the front sat Lucas and his mother, the boy offering a small wave as they passed. Beside them sat Amber Foster, her usual haughty demeanor replaced by something quieter and more thoughtful. The months following the fire had changed her in subtle but significant ways. Principal Foster approached the microphone as they reached their seats in the front row. "Welcome, everyone, to this very special assembly. Today marks 1 year since Olivia Wilson and her remarkable companion Shadow joined our Maple Grove family. What began as a controversy has become one of our school's proudest transformations." She gestured toward a large object covered with a cloth at the side of the stage. "Today, we dedicate the new Maple Grove Elementary mural, a permanent reminder of the lessons we've learned about courage, acceptance, and the remarkable bonds between humans and animals." At her signal, 2 teachers pulled away the covering to reveal a brilliantly colored mosaic spanning 8 feet across. At its center stood a German shepherd figure, dignified and protective, surrounded by the handprints of Maple Grove's students, each one painted and pressed onto the canvas in vibrant colors. Above it all, elegant script spelled out, "Courage comes in many forms." Applause filled the gymnasium as Principal Foster continued, "I'd like to invite Olivia Wilson to come up and share a few words." David squeezed Olivia's hand encouragingly as she stood, Shadow automatically rising with her. They made their way to the stage together, the German shepherd matching his pace perfectly to hers, always protective, always attentive. Standing before the microphone, Olivia looked momentarily overwhelmed by the sea of faces. Then Shadow pressed gently against her leg, the deep pressure therapy that had helped her through countless moments of anxiety, and she straightened, finding her voice. "A year ago, I didn't want to talk to anyone," she began softly. "I was scared all the time after my mom died. Shadow was the only one who understood." The gymnasium fell silent, hundreds of people leaning forward to catch her quiet words. "When we came here, I thought everyone would always be mean to me because I was different, and some people were, at first." Her eyes found Amber and Lucas in the audience, her expression free of resentment. But then something happened. Shadow showed everyone that being different isn't bad. Being different can save people. Dr. Harper, seated beside David, nodded approvingly as Olivia continued with growing confidence. "Now Shadow helps lots of kids at school. When someone feels scared or sad or angry, he knows what to do. And the best part is, everyone's learning from him. You don't have to be afraid of things that seem scary at first. You just have to try to understand them." The simplicity and wisdom of her words brought tears to many eyes in the audience. David watched with swelling pride as his daughter, once so withdrawn she could barely speak to strangers, addressed her entire school community with poise and genuine emotion. "Thank you for making Shadow official," Olivia concluded, "and thank you for helping us find a new home here." The applause that followed was thunderous, people rising to their feet in spontaneous tribute to the small girl and her extraordinary dog. Shadow, ever the professional, remained calmly at Olivia's side, accepting the adulation with dignified reserve. As they returned to their seats, Superintendent Wallace took the microphone. "As part of today's ceremony, we have a special announcement. The Maple Grove School Board has unanimously approved the establishment of a comprehensive therapy dog program for the entire district, inspired by Shadow's success here. Starting next semester, specially trained dogs will visit each school on a rotating basis, providing support for students experiencing anxiety, learning difficulties, or emotional challenges." More applause filled the gymnasium, but the superintendent raised his hand for quiet. "There's more. In recognition of the extraordinary service demonstrated during the fire, the Maple County Emergency Services Department has awarded Shadow official honorary status as a county rescue animal." A uniformed fire captain stepped forward, presenting a special collar medallion that glinted in the gymnasium lights. Shadow accepted the decoration with characteristic dignity, though his tail wagged slightly as the captain scratched behind his ears. After the ceremony concluded, families gathered in small groups, enjoying refreshments and admiring the new mural. Olivia found herself surrounded by classmates who had once kept their distance, but now sought her company and, perhaps more importantly, Shadow's attention. David watched from a few paces away, content to let his daughter navigate her new social world with Shadow's steady support. Dr. Harper joined him, offering a cup of punch. Quite a transformation, she observed. Both of them, David nodded, watching as Lucas cautiously offered Shadow a treat, his hand steady despite the lingering traces of his former fear. Nearby, Amber was showing Olivia her own artwork, a detailed drawing of Shadow leading children to safety. "I never expected this," David admitted. "When we moved here, all I wanted was a quiet place where Olivia could heal. I never imagined—" "That's the thing about healing," Dr. Sir Harper said thoughtfully. "It rarely happens in isolation. True recovery tends to ripple outward, touching everyone around it." Principal Foster approached, her expression warm. "I'd say we got much more than we bargained for when you enrolled Olivia last year. David." "For better or worse?" he asked with a slight smile. "Definitely for better," she assured him. This school needed the lessons Shadow taught us as much as Olivia needed acceptance. As the winter afternoon light slanted through the gymnasium windows, casting long golden rays across the gathering, David watched his daughter kneel beside Shadow, her small arms encircling the dog's powerful neck in a gesture of pure love and trust. The German shepherd turned his head, gently touching his nose to her cheek, a gesture as tender as any human embrace. In that moment, David knew with absolute certainty that they had found not just a school, not just a town, but a true home. The circle that had begun in tragedy had transformed, against all odds, into something beautiful and whole. As we grow older, we recognize that life's most profound lessons often come wrapped in unexpected packages. The story of Olivia and Shadow reminds us that sometimes our greatest healers have 4 paws and unwavering loyalty. For many of us who have weathered life's storms, losing loved ones, facing health challenges, or feeling increasingly invisible in a fast-paced world, this tale resonates deeply. We understand the power of a companion who asks nothing but offers everything, who sees our pain when others look away. We know what it means to start over in unfamiliar places, to rebuild when foundations crumble. Shadow's journey reflects our own resilience, scarred but stronger, wounded but still capable of remarkable courage. The connection between a child and her dog transcends mere companionship. It mirrors the unconditional love many of us yearn for in our twilight years. Perhaps what touches us most is how Shadow bridges generations, healing not just Olivia, but an entire community caught in misunderstanding and fear. In a world that often dismisses the wisdom of age and experience, Shadow reminds us that our scars are badges of honor, and that even in our silver years, we still have profound gifts to offer those who need them most.